Hello, my friends. Welcome. My name is Joe. This is the Joe Martino Show. And today I'm going to read you two letters that I found to be pretty funny, where people told me I was, at the very least, stupid. One of them told me I was stupid and ugly. They guess they didn't tell me. They wrote it. It's just funny. Hopefully you'll find some humor in that. And then I want to talk about what happens when we're growing and we feel pain. What happens when we're trying to mature, when we're trying to achieve more and it's hard? What does that mean? Let's kick it off. This is the Joe Martino Show.
You're listening to The Joe Martino Show, a podcast dealing with all things emotional, relational, and human nature. Joe is a licensed counselor in the state of Michigan, specializing in relationship therapy. He is also the author of the book, The Emotionally Secure Couple. All advice offered in this episode is offered for entertainment and educational purposes only. Enjoy the show.
Hello, my friends. Welcome. I hope that your day is going well. Wherever your day is, I hope that it is a great day. We're going to take a little detour to start today's show, and I'm going to read some fun emails that I have gotten from people who do not like the show. I am going to read one from people who do like the show. If you've emailed me in the past and I've talked about your email, you know that I typically reach out first. All of the emails that I'm reading today, no one actually shared their email address, so I wasn't able to reach out first. And there's no identifying information that I know of when I read this. So here we go. Dear Joe, I don't usually write emails like this, but after listening to your show, I felt a civic duty to warn you. What you're doing should not be happening in public. Okay, so time out. I just want to do this like the guy that used to do the celebrities reading mean tweets, but this isn't a tweet. It's an email and it goes a while. A friend of mine told me how much she loved your podcast, so I took a listen. I was appalled at how dumb you sound. I thought you must be good looking, and that is why my friend was listening to you. So I went to your website and looked. Nope, you're ugly and kind of dumb. I know we're not supposed to say that in today's economy, but I'm blessed to call it like I see it. I'm sure you are. I'm honestly impressed by how confidently you talk while saying so little. It takes a special level of stupidity to ramble for an entire episode and still manage to sound like you haven't done the reading, the thinking, or the basic self-reflection required to host a podcast. It's like listening to someone explain emotions using bumper sticker logic and half-remembered psychology terms. You present yourself as insightful, but mostly what comes out sounds like recycled opinions wrapped in a tone that suggests you believe you're much smarter than the rest of us. You're not. Yeah, you've covered that. You've told me I'm dumb a couple times. And the gap between how smart you think you are and what you actually are is noticeable. The worst part is you sound convinced that you're helping people. That's genuinely concerning. I'd suggest doing more listening and less podcasting. But based on the show that I listen to, listening doesn't appear to be a strong suit either. Please consider shutting the mic off until you've sorted out what you're actually trying to say and why anyone should care. Sincerely, someone who regrets listening to her friend. Well, thank you for that. Someone who regrets listening to her friend. Okay, one more. Dear Joe, I made it halfway through your show before realizing I wasn't learning anything new. I was just listening to someone confidently narrate his own misunderstandings. You are a mansplainer, and your idea that we are all responsible for how we feel and nothing makes us feel anything is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. Your masterclass is a podcast in not understanding psychology, thoughtful thinking, or acting without thinking. I'm just reading it as it's written. You linger on the idea as if the audience should be taking notes. Newsflash, no one is. What's especially as impressive is your ability to confuse things. I hope that isn't true. At times, it sounds like you're auditioning to be taken seriously rather than actually doing the work that earns it. I feel like that was written, I'm just going to be clear, I feel like that was written by, at the very least, it was skimmed and rewritten by AI. And she goes on to say, you don't need a bigger platform. You need to go away and not say anything. Until then, you are an idiot. Thank you. That's very helpful critique. So I do want to be clear. Not everybody who writes in writes like that. There's been some helpful critiques. There have been some helpful suggestions. There's been some that have been helpful or at least thoughtful that I haven't taken. People, probably the biggest critique that I get is people either want longer or shorter podcast episodes. I've had people write in and say that I should keep it under 10 minutes. I've had people write in and say that I should run it closer to an hour, and kind of times in between. And that's fine. Like, you're like, I don't mind that. I've had people write in and tell me that they liked episodes, that they appreciated what I had to say, or maybe they disagreed with me, but they appreciated how I had to say it, or whatever. But I do find those ones funny, and I enjoy sharing those with you and with my friends. I'll often send them. I got one. I don't know that I should read it. That I sent to my whole family and to some of my friends. It was just very, very angry and a lot of misspelled words, which is always fun when somebody's calling me an idiot and they have a lot of misspelled words. Why don't we read it real quick? Dear Joe, I listened to your podcast and I am honestly mad at myself for doing it. I want that time back. I could have stared at a wall and gotten more out of it. You just keep talking and talking and talking. Like at some point, a point is going to show up, but it never does. It's just word salad, emotional word salad. You say things like you just blew everyone's mind, but it's literally stuff most people learn by accident at age 12. Do you ever prepare, or do you just hit record and hope confidence carries you? Because it doesn't, you sound lost. Like a guy who thinks he's deep, but is actually just loud. I had to double check you weren't a parody account. No way this is real. No way a grown man talks this much without knowing what he's saying. And the worst part is you sound like you think you're helping people. See, that, I swear, who's ever doing this, that's got to be, right? That's the other thing. At one point, I actually laughed out loud because I thought, there's no way he's serious right now, but you were dead serious. That's the scariest part. Please stop podcasting until you read a book or take a psychology class. You realize talking nonstop doesn't make you smart. It just makes you exhausting. This show is bad, like really bad. Turn off the mic, unplug it, throw it away. Sincerely, someone who is still angry that they hit play. My favorite is their email was noway@defundice.com. Their subject was you're, Y-O-U-R, not Y-O-U''re, an idiot. So, okay, again, helpful feedback there. And now I wasted 6 minutes of this to that. So I think that's just funny. I usually enjoy getting those emails. But at some point, we should probably start talking about what it is we're actually here to talk about today, which is the idea that growth will often feel like loss. In fact, I used to tell people, and sometimes I still do, when I'm in the room with them, I often will, all growth is change and all change is loss, and all loss should be grieved. So one of the things that happens is emotional maturity usually includes grief, not just relief. Look at that rhymed to my critics. Most people think that growth should be freeing, right? But the problem is it often isn't. We don't often, when we're in the process of growing, we don't typically feel lighter. We don't typically feel better right away. We don't typically feel more clear. We can often feel more distressed, more upset. We can actually feel a sense of loss. We can feel lethargic because grief will run through our body as we're growing, because a lot of times what's happening is as you're growing, you're losing something that served you at one point. And that's a really important thing to consider, that most of the things that you want to change, at one point they served you. At one point they helped you, at least emotionally, in a way that your body kind of filed away as, oh, we need to do that again and again. And what happened was, rather than you controlling it, it came to control you. And so sometimes what happens is when people come in to counseling, or when they start to engage in a process where they want to grow, that growth is really actually very scary. And that growth is actually very disorienting, because they're experiencing loss, and loss should be grieved. And I think what can happen for people is they think that it's proof that somehow they're not growing. They think it's proof that they're failing. And in reality, it's proof that they are growing. It's proof that they are experiencing growth, that they're changing, that they're improving, that their mental and emotional health, and sometimes their physical health, is getting better. But then what happens is they experience the loss of that. And sometimes what happens is the friends that they had when they were unhealthy, the relationships that they had, that they're familiar with, that they're comfortable with, they start to fall off. They start to fall away. They start to change. Because not everybody in your circle is going to want to get healthy with you, nor will they be willing to pay the price to be healthy with you, or maybe they're just incapable of getting healthy at this moment. And you can see this a lot in friendships, especially, I think the easiest place to see it is in friendships through college. There are people in college, especially as we create a society that continues to encourage young people to not grow up, right? We have a society that has produced a mantra to young people in the early 20s, grow up as late as you can, all of those things. Like growing up is bad. I don't want to adult today, all of those things. Right, and so what happens is when someone just says, you know what, I do want to adult. I want to start growing up. I want to start changing. I want to start engaging my growth process. People with them might not be willing to pay that price yet. They might not be able to yet, and that's okay. But it is going to create two levels of loss for you. There's going to be the level of loss that you had when you were, right, as you're going through the growth process, but then you're also going to experience the loss of losing those friendships, and that is okay. It's not proof that there's something wrong with you. It's just proof that you're growing. And I think part of the issue here is we tend to think that grief is really only associated with bad things, right? So if somebody dies, we expect people to grieve. Somebody loses their job, we expect people to grieve. If somebody loses a friendship, we expect them to grieve, or a divorce or something like that. Like we expect that there's going to be grief there. But we don't think about it as what happens when somebody's identity grows? What happens to the old identity? Did they lose that identity? Often they did, and they might grieve through that. What if somebody's role changes? Somebody's role changes in their life. I talked about this a couple years ago as I was watching my kids grow up. There was grief to it. There was great joy. There was great pride in who my kids are and who they were becoming. But there was also grief. And I think it might have been a blog post. It might have been a podcast episode. I don't remember. But I was like, hey, fellow dads, you're going to grieve as your kids grow up, and that's okay. Because one of the things that happens is society's like, well, I never felt sad that my kids were growing up. That's just part of life. Okay, so Chad, can I just tell you something? That's actually called suppression. When someone says that to you, like, hey, I'm grieving that my kids are growing up, and you're like, that's just part of life. That's not healthy. And if Chad, if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to read it on the air for you. Right? What happens when somebody's beliefs change? This happened to me. I grew up in one set of beliefs, and as I got older, they changed, they morphed, they grew. I can speak, I promise, despite what some of those emails say. I am educated. And they grew, and there was loss there. Or how about coping strategies? One of the things that I don't do a lot of addictions therapy, but one of the things that those who do have told me about is that people grieve the strategies, the things that they were using their dysfunction to cope. They grieve the loss of that as a coping strategy. What about visions of relationships that we hoped would work? Have you ever been there? Maybe your friend changed and they went someplace you can't go with them because you don't think it's healthy. Or maybe you changed and your friend doesn't want to go there with you and you lost that relationship. You're allowed to grieve it. And here's the thing I think that we have to consider is growth requires letting go of things that once protected us or served us. And when we outgrow them, we are allowed to grieve them because even unhealthy patterns often served a purpose. One of my mentors used to say to me all the time, in fact, I would imagine if I saw him, I just haven't seen him recently, if I saw him today, he would say to me again that dysfunction serves a function. That's another way to say that even unhealthy patterns served a purpose. And so when we outgrow them, our nervous system, what I made fun of last week is our dysregulated nervous system, it still registers loss, and that's okay. So here's what happens when we start to change. A lot of times we think, man, I thought I would feel better. I thought setting boundaries would feel empowering. Instead, it's just sad. Now, caveat that I want to say every time I talk about boundaries are not for other people. Boundaries are for you. Boundaries are not for other people. Boundaries are for you. Boundaries are not for other people. They're for you. But here's the thing. When you set a boundary, when you say to someone, hey, because you refuse to stop engaging in this, I am no longer engaging with you because you can engage in that, but I can't. That is sad. I've had to draw boundaries with people in my own family. I just don't talk to them anymore. And I know that this is a controversial topic today. I simply do not talk to them. And I've had to draw the boundary. And I tell you, I grieve it. I grieve it. I grieve it. I grieve it. And it doesn't feel empowering. It feels sad. It's grief. It's depressing. It's all of the synonyms that go with that. You might hear people say, you know what, I actually am healthier, but I miss who I used to be, right? Because think about the person that struggles with alcohol. That served them a purpose. A lot of times, it might have served them the purpose that they were funny or they felt they were funny. And everybody talked about how, wild they were, but it didn't serve them. One of the ones that I see the most is people who break up with someone. So I'm talking to my people who are dating and they break up with someone or they stop interacting with someone who was a friend. I see this with college friends as they become adults and somebody refuses to grow up. And they're like, you know what? I know that relationship wasn't good for me, but I miss that person. I miss at least the very idea of what it used to be. And I think that's one of the things that's hard is when we're in the stage of grief, because we will often suppress it, what happens is we talk about our idea of the relationship, not what the relationship actually was. So I was talking to a guy one time who had stopped talking to his dad. It was not a decision he came to easily. He had seen me for a long time. And as he was working through that, he came to the conclusion, I have to stop talking to my dad. And so then the question becomes, well, how do you feel about that? And so as he and I were talking about that, I asked him, I was like, so, hey, how do you feel about that? And he said to me, he said, my wife asked me that the other day. And here's what I know. I grieve what the relationship isn't. But even if I went back into it, the relationship wouldn't be that. So what I'm actually grieving is the fact that I think my dad's incapable of giving me the relationship that is actually healthy. And so he felt bad about that. And here's the thing. If he's in a circle where he's not allowed to openly grieve that, he's not going to be able to grow through that with people. He can do it on his own. But like if his wife was like, then he's in trouble. Like he is in emotional and mental trouble. Because here's something that we then have to consider. Growth doesn't just add new skills. It subtracts old illusions. It subtracts old identities. It subtracts old skills that are no longer serving you or maybe never did. And subtraction almost always brings pain. It almost always hurts at first. And it often hurts longer than we think it should. So, just think through this for a few minutes. Maybe you were the person known as the fixer. Maybe you were known as the peacemaker. Maybe you were a people pleaser who was known as the strong one. And when you lay that identity down, what happens? It creates a vacuum. And now maybe the people that you used to help in an unhealthy manner, maybe they're actually mad at you. Or maybe they're not mad at you. They're just caught off guard and they don't know how to process this new reality. And you, because your nervous system is so finely attuned to all the disruptions in the force, if you will, that you recognize that they're confused and you interpret that as them being mad at you. That's going to create distress because the other thing is, if you're giving up an identity that isn't serving you, the natural question becomes, who are you? Maybe you're giving up the loss. Maybe you're giving up a fantasy, but that's a loss of fantasy. And I don't mean fantasy like, hey, what's your favorite thing to do in the bedroom? I mean fantasy like you grieve the relationship that just was never going to be what it could be. It was never going to be healthy. And so you grieve that loss. Maybe you're grieving the relationship loss with a husband, an ex-husband, an ex-wife. Maybe you're grieving the relationship loss with a parent or a sibling or a child. And these are rough and difficult conversations. And the proof that this is part of the problem today is if you spend any time in any of the self-help circles, it's almost always talked about with a blatant all of this and none of that. And it's insane to me because it's typically a really nuanced, really complicated conversation, right? And so you grieve the relationship that never could be, the parent that you wanted but never was going to happen, the version of yourself that you thought would arrive if you just worked harder, if you just tried harder. And sometimes it just isn't meant to be, right? Like And, I think about this. Young me thought, well, if I just work harder, I'll be a great athlete. No, to be clear, I did not probably maximize the ability that I was given. But it probably, no matter how much of it I did maximize, I'm probably not skilled enough. In fact, do we take probably out of that sentence? I don't have enough skills. I didn't have enough skills then to be something that I wasn't. And that can be loss. That can be painful. That can really hurt. When one of my daughters was young, I will never forget this. She was in my vehicle. I picked her up. We were talking about kids at school. And she said to me, Dad, I just don't know why they don't like me. And one of the hardest things that you have to teach your kid is it doesn't matter what you do. Sometimes people aren't going to like you. And that's okay. But it's also painful, right? Like growth is accepting that truth that not everyone's going to like me. But then I'm also going to have to grieve the fantasy that everyone's going to like me. In fact, we can run the other side of that. Maybe you were one of the few people that everybody did like. That's rarely healthy too. In fact, I have yet to meet a person who everyone likes that is actually healthy. And so now we're kind of caught there. How about when we lose coping strategies? I think one of the things that people don't understand is for people who've learned to numb themselves out, when they grow from that, when they move from that and they start to outpace that, they grieve the loss of that coping mechanism because now they're going to feel all of the things that they were trying to numb over here. And it's going to be painful. And that's okay. Maybe one of the biggest things that brings pain is when you start to get healthy, when you start to grow, when you start to mature, there's going to be a loss of belonging. There's going to be a loss of relationship because growth can change relationships. Some people, they're just going to leave you. Some people, they won't, but you're going to outgrow the dynamic that kept you connected. So I think about this a lot with like guys that I know in their 20s and 30s who are starting with a family, and they have relationships that are built all around sports or they're built all around video games. And that might work while they're married with no kids. But when the kids start coming, suddenly hey, you got to help with the kids. You got to help around the house. And society's solution to that is we don't have kids, which is a whole nother rant. It's a whole nother episode. But what happens is for the guy that says, no, I want to have kids, I want to grow, I just can't play video games as much anymore, he loses friendships. And that can be grieved. In fact, it probably should be grieved. And this probably brings up a bigger conversation that we need to have, because often grief will feel like regression because regression feels like regret and regret feels like grief. And now we're just kind of spinning like, well, wait, what's the difference here? Because a lot of times what happens is when you're growing, you start to feel this pain while you're still in the in-between. When you're still in between who you used to be and who you want to become. When you're still in between using the coping skills that you used to use, and now you're not, but now you need to use new ones. When you're still in between being a people pleaser and transitioning to being a person who helps people in a healthy way, there can be a lot of tension there. And what happens is it's kind of like a wound, right? My son broke his hand earlier, not this year, late last year, and he had to wear a splint for 4 weeks. And when he took his splint off, there was still a little bit of discomfort there. Because what happens is it felt tender. It felt a little bit unstable because it had grown. If he had left it on too long, it would have grown too dependent on it. While it was healing, it had to be somewhat dependent on it. And so now there's this tension. But the thing of it is that's not your process or your journey collapsing. It's proof that you're in the transition. It's proof that you're in the process. It's proof that you are growing. And that's really important. Grief is like just admitting, hey, you know what? This hurts. It mattered and it hurts. Grief is, I used to do that and now I don't know what I'm doing and I'm feeling this way. Regret is, I made the wrong choice because I feel that discomfort. Those aren't the same. You can grieve whatever it is that you're moving from without wishing you went back. Now, I want to be clear here. You can wish that you will go back without actually going back. I would want to say that because there's going to be some people who they're going to be like, man, I just wish I had never given that up. I just wish I would have gone back. That doesn't mean you have to, right? Like this is part of the whole, in one of the earlier episodes, I talked about emotional health or probably one of the earlier episodes. In a lot of earlier episodes, I talked about emotional health. And one of the things that happens is You can feel something and not do it. So you can feel like, man, I should just go back. I should go back to that relationship that isn't healthy. I should go back into that system that isn't healthy. I should go back to that numbing coping mechanism. And if you don't do it, that doesn't mean that you are unhealthy. It just means that you're going through the pain of growth. What we don't want to do is we don't want to interpret sadness as a sign that we failed. We don't want to interpret grief as a sign that we have to go back. We don't want to interpret the desire to go back as proof that we have to go back. And one of the things that happens is when we let grief run the show, certainly there's the temptation that we'll run back, right? And I see this, right? But there's another temptation when people avoid grief, they rush into the next. They rush into the next. They rush into a new relationship. My wife and I are both therapists, and we'll often say that one of the things that is an observation of many counselors is people who go through divorce. The nastier the divorce, the more likely they are to marry the same person again. It's just a different name because they don't allow themselves times to grieve. They don't allow themselves times to feel the pain and grow from it. They don't move back, but they move forward, unhealed. So all of the choosing mechanisms that led them to the first dysfunction lead them to the same dysfunction. It just has a different name. And that's important because, another thing is, so we might be tempted to go back. We might be tempted to rush to the next thing. We might intellectualize rather than feel. And for a lot of my smart friends, my book smart friends, I need to say, this is the temptation. We're just gonna intellectualize it. In church circles, we might call this spiritualizing it. I'm just chasing Jesus. I'll never forget the time that I was talking to a woman who had divorced her husband. He had been a terrible husband, did a lot of terrible things. And she's like, Jesus is my boyfriend now. He's my lover. Nope, he's your savior. That's a little weird. And what she's really doing is she's just trying to avoid the discomfort of she's alone. That's painful. Yeah, and sometimes we can romanticize either the past or the future. We get caught in this romanticization of what isn't, because what is currently the thing that we're living in is incredibly painful. And then, of course, the worst part of this is when we refuse to grieve, I think we can get caught up in undoing boundaries prematurely. And that is incredibly painful. So what does healthy growth actually look like in the midst of grief? I think that's a really fair question. So I'm glad you asked. Healthy growth accepts that there is clarity and sadness at the same time, that two things can exist at the same time, that you can be really sad and have made the right choice, that you can be really sad and recognize that you had patterns that you have to change, that you can have relief mixed with loss. You can actually have those moments where you're like, oh, that feels so much better. And man, I regret, I feel bad, I miss the things that were back there. Even if those things weren't real, I miss what I constructed them to be. Gratitude and disappointment can coexist, right? We can be thankful that we made the movement and we can be disappointed that we ever had to make the choice. I think that's something that we miss. Competing emotions can exist at the same time on the same decision in the same brain. And so we can feel great gratitude that we moved forward, and we can feel great distress and disappointment that we ever had to make those choices. That's not weakness. It's integration of wholeness. And really, I talk about this a lot, integration of wellness, right? If we've talked before, if you've ever been to anything I've done in public, typically at some point, I draw 4 boxes: belief systems, values, actions, consequences. And one of the things I tell people is you have the healthiest life when you have those 4 boxes integrated. So what does this mean for you, the listener? Well, let me just speak to the person that's in the middle of it right now. You're in the middle of growth right now. You are chasing what does it mean to be healthy right now. And it feels really heavy right now. It is sitting on your chest. You feel like the circus elephant has just been trained to sit right on the middle of your lungs, and you're just struggling to breathe. I want you to be able to recognize that and say, you know what? I'm just struggling to catch my breath. And it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It may mean that you're finally letting go of something that once kept you safe, but didn't actually keep you safe. In other words, You're letting go of something that you thought kept you safe, but it doesn't. And you just need to expect that your brain is always going to react to that. Grief is the price of honesty. I just don't know how we live our life. I was talking to, I forget who it was. I think it was a client this week. And we were talking about parenting. And I said to her something I say a lot. There's nothing that will invite you to more regret than parenting. And if we can't admit that, then we are costing ourselves growth at the price of honesty. We're costing ourselves honesty at the price of growth. On the other side of grief, there might be relief. There might not be. That's the hard part. But there will be depth. There will be more healthiness. Now, here's the thing that won't be on the other side. There won't be more easiness. There won't be, there won't be more simplicity. Often, it will be more difficult. Now, you can create some simplistic structure in your life, but life in and of itself, if you're going to be involved with people, typically tends to be complicated. And so if you're living today and you're chasing growth and it feels hard, that's okay. If you're at a spot where right now you're like, you know what, the growth that I'm chasing isn't hard, that's good too. Just know that when it does come for you, the hard part of growth, it doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't mean that you made a bad turn. It just means you're in the phase of growth that is hard. All right, I hope this helps for my friends out there who are trying to grow. I hope this helps you if you're in a season of transition in your life. I hope that this helps you know that hard doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. And if you didn't find any value in that part of the episode, I hope you enjoyed the letters written to me. Listen, if you've enjoyed this, would you do me a favor? Would you share it with your friends? I can't tell you how much that helps me. Leave me a review in the podcast store. Leave me a comment. Reach out to me. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share with a friend. And hey, give us that rating in your podcast store. Until next time, change possible.